Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited to kick off the day. First of all, I just want to introduce myself, and I just want to say I hope you are all staying safe and healthy. I am Jana Amin, a 16-year-old, now 17-year-old Egyptian American activist based in Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm super passionate about advocating for girls' education and changing the narrative around Muslim women. So I grew up in Egypt and now live in the US, and I'm super grateful to all the amazing speakers who will be joining me throughout the day. If you don't know, this is the 17 for 17 Advocating for Girls' Education event that I'm hosting for my 17th birthday. And so it features 17 incredible speakers throughout the day that I'm super excited for you all to hear. I grew up in Egypt until I was 10 years old, and I was lucky enough to have access to schooling. But millions of girls around the world cannot go to school, and they will never learn how to read. They will never learn how to write, simply because they cannot go to school. And so education has been so critical to who I am. And it's definitely something I'm advocating for because I believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to go to school and thus have a voice. According to a new report by the Malala Fund, 10 million more secondary school age girls could be out of school after this current coronavirus pandemic has passed. And I just think that that's such a huge number. And unfortunately, in crises like COVID-19, girls and young women are often the first to be removed from school and the last to return. But at the same time, right, educating young women is so critical to public health and our economies. And so I was thinking about what I wanted to do for my 17th birthday, and there was no other option really than to support and advocate for girls' education who girls who cannot be as privileged as I am to go to school. And so I'm super excited about this incredible lineup, 17 speakers, 3 amazing moderators, and I'm especially proud that our speakers represent a wide age range. Our youngest is 13 years old, and our speakers represent 15 countries. It was almost 17, but not quite, so exciting. I'm also raising money for the Collateral Repair Project, an NGO in Jordan that I've worked closely with for the past 2 years. And so the Collateral Repair Project does a ton of work around refugees in Jordan and has an amazing open door policy. I hope you consider supporting their Super Girls program, which helps young refugee girls in Jordan reintegrate into school systems while reducing their trauma-induced anxiety. So please do donate if you can. Before I kick off with our first speaker, I'd like to go over some housekeeping. And so you can watch the event on Dr. Rana Al-Qayyubi's Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn Live, as well as her Twitter. So please do make sure to head to those. You can also watch it on Dr. Alet Morabit's Facebook, and a number of people will be hosting Facebook watch parties throughout the day. So feel free to do the same if you are watching right now. And please do share the word about this event using the hashtags #17for17 and #girlseducation. As well, we will be trying to stream throughout the day to janaamin.com, but we're currently having a few issues there. So just head over to the Facebooks and Instagrams if you can. Finally, the event is divided into 6 one-hour sessions, which are separate events on Facebook. And so after every session, I will be announcing that we'll be moving over to the next session, and I'll be emceeing throughout the day, introducing our amazing lineup of speakers. With that, it is my real pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day, Suzanne Ehlers, the CEO of the Malala Fund. Before that, she was the president and CEO of Population Action International, a nonprofit working for universal access to reproductive health care. She also worked at the Wallace Global Fund and served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Central African Republic. Suzanne is also World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, and she was so kind to agree to do this when my mom reached out to her via LinkedIn, and I'm just so grateful and can't wait to get started through the day with her. And so, Suzanne, can you please tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into girls' education?
I would love to. And let me first start off, though, saying a happy birthday to Jana and admitting that when I was celebrating my 17th birthday, I was definitely not hosting a 17 and doing something that's both ambitious, it's generous, it's pulling people together in a moment where people feel a real need for connection. And so I want to just sort of honor you and salute you for what I'm sure takes courage and bravery to sort of pull this together and try to advance an agenda in such an sort of uncertain time. So let's start there. So happy birthday to you, and thanks for including me in the kickoff. Malala Fund is delighted to be at the top of the show this morning. Yeah. My own personal story is that I grew up in South Texas, And I say that I grew up in a pretty traditional household, with sort of traditional gendered roles. And yet, as the one daughter of parents, never once felt those limitations put on me. My mom and dad, from the beginning, believed in me, supported me, and really pushed me to do whatever it was that my heart led me to do. I think I knew from a pretty early age that was going to have to be around women and girls. I always felt just such a passion for the potential of women and girls. And I think I probably didn't fully kind of understand the depth of that commitment until I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Central African Republic. And I've said it before, and I'll say it 1,000 more times. I was literally kept alive and afloat by my female friends in the CAR. Women who showed me the way, women who taught me the language, girls who taught me how to play games, people told me how to fetch water. It was really the women and girls in my community who at once were invisible to those around them, and yet so invested in me as a person and as sort of a partner on the journey of life. And so when I came back to the States after that volunteer experience and started my own professional career, the thread of women and girls has been there absolutely throughout. And I've only joined a Malala Fund about 3.5 months ago. So I'm pretty new to the organization, but not new at all to the equation of girls' education. I see it, and Jana, I think you've said this in the conversations we've had, it's a real kind of connector issue. It's sort of this leverage issue that once you give a girl those 12 years of safe, free, and high quality education, the rest of the world is hers. Her potential is unlimited in what she can unlock and what she can transform. And it's exciting to be working on an issue that is such a strong return on investment. So that's my own story of how I came into the career path that I'm on and what an honor it is to work on girls' education.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, I think watching and seeing the impact that educating one girl has on an entire community is just so amazing. And I think that's kind of when I think about the impact education has had on both of our lives, that's certainly what I think of. And I just hope that we can do as much as possible to really give that opportunity to girls around the world. So with that, can you tell us a little bit about the impact education has had on your own life and where we stand with girls' education now?
Oh, it's, I mean, the impact that education's had on my own life has been extraordinary. And it has opened up my eyes to how central education is to everything else that we want to achieve in life. I'm sure we all have memories when we're in elementary school or in middle school and we don't want to wake up in the morning and we don't want to go to school. I have 2 girls, one in 7th grade, one in 4th grade. And I'll tell you, before COVID, they had mornings like that where the last thing they want to do is roll out of bed and get dressed for the day. And then all of a sudden, the COVID-19 crisis, I think, has really laid bare for all of us what a privilege and an honor it is to be able to go to school every day. I think as parents, we have this newfound respect for educators and what key roles they play in the lives of our children. And I think that our children all of a sudden see that schools are more than just places of learning. They're places of connection, of social learning, of curiosity. It's places where people feel safe and secure. It's where many kids get nutritious and balanced meals every day. So in some ways, even though it is a health crisis, COVID-19 has really put education sort of so at the center and it's made me go back in my own life and kind of consider the ways in which my ability to learn, my privilege to go to wonderful schools and universities, never having my pursuit of education challenged or threatened or even questioned, like how much I still, even though I'm in this field, had really taken that for granted before COVID-19 kind of laid bare so much inequity and inequality. And I think that's unfortunately what Malala Fund is seeing. We're worried about a couple of things. You mentioned them in the opening, Jana. We're worried about the vast number of girls who will probably never go back into school after the COVID-19 crisis has passed. Those were girls who might have been in school, but pretty tenuously, and it will be really hard for them to get back. That's for girls who were never in school in the first place, and this crisis will just make it that much more difficult for them to ever have a shot at education. We also think about the interruption in learning and how it will be harder for girls who are getting less schooling anyway to really make up the time that they're losing right now, and to get caught back up on lessons and to sort of figure out how to make up for lost time. And so if you start to think of that in the ways that it impacts, the workforce of the future or the political leadership of the future, economic growth and productivity of the future, women and girls are at the center of that. And it's such a responsibility to make sure that those girls do find a chance for education after COVID so that they can go on and play the role in the world that we all know. We all know they want to play, and we all know we need them to play.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's certainly something that concerns me as well when I think of how much progress NGOs, leaders, activists, performers, artists, I mean, all sorts of people had really made on girls' education prior to this. It was kind of, I mean, that was amazing. And then now we're seeing that suddenly we might be rolling back on some of that progress. And I think that really does sadden me. But I hope that I think through this COVID-19 crisis that we're all seeing the impact that education has on our life and how much schools are central to our day-to-day routines. And I really hope that we can channel that realization towards helping girls around the world go back to school.
Yeah, and I think that, I think that there is certainly some parts of this story right now that still feel so uncertain and scary, and we don't yet know how the story ends. But, I think there's also in our education report about girls' education in COVID-19, we also begin to tell a story of that resilience and recovery, right? So if we don't want to roll back, and we are seeing some of the ways in which the system that we've built does not give equal access and does not give girls and really marginalized and vulnerable children the chances that they need, how do we build back after COVID-19 in a way that is stronger, that is better, that is more resilient to future shocks? The truth is, and this is sort of hard to say when we're still in the middle of COVID-19, this isn't the last of them. This is not the last of big shocks that will threaten girls' access to their unlimited futures and their unlimited potential. So it's our responsibility as advocates like you, Jana, as leaders like me in the nonprofit sector, to really sort of think about building back in a way that provides such a solid foundation so that we are better able to withstand and recover from the inevitable shocks of the future.
Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives that you're particularly excited about that are addressing some of those issues at the Malala Fund?
I would love to. So first of all, the organization, as you know, started by Malala and Ziauddin Yousafzai, amazing co-founders and board members of the organization. And what an honor and privilege it's been for me to get to know both of them through this process of interviewing and then sort of being offered this role at Malala Fund. The team and the board at the organization are extraordinary, amazing professionals with such a high standard for excellence, because the work that we're doing on behalf of girls around the world, in my mind, is some of the most important work that's out there. So this moment is an interesting one. We had just kicked off a brand new strategic plan on April 1st, a 5-year plan with a roadmap for where we were headed. And what's been really comforting, I think, to the team, and a point of pride, quite frankly, is that plan is still right. Our model is still right. We still are investing in local leaders. In the countries where we work, we're investing in people on the front lines of advocating for girls' education. And we'd be investing in them in normal times, and we're going to invest in them even more and ever more relentlessly in the moment of COVID. So I think of someone like our partner Haroon with his organization Orinda in Pakistan, and the really innovative work he's doing around distance learning and a distance learning app that in fact is getting support from the government in a moment where all kids are out of school. I think of another, sort of education champion like Kiki in Nigeria and working for ACE Charity and thinking really creative and in innovative ways about radio programming to really reach the most marginalized and vulnerable children. So Malala Fund is doing that, right? We're continuing to invest in local innovators, local champions, local educators, and activists who are already on the front lines, and they're still really on the front lines. We are also making sure that we're doing advocacy. Governments around the world are feeling a ton of pressure right now, and rightfully so. Where are we going to invest our scarce resources? How are we going to kickstart our economies again? This is a health crisis. We've got to respond with health funding. And we say, yes, but education has to be at the center of it. So Malala Fund is doing its signature advocacy at the global level and led by Malala and her father and their amazing access and influence and powerful voices to really talk with donor governments and low and middle income country governments to say, do not forget the education equation. This is the key to your future, and girls are the key to that future. So a couple of examples, both from kind of the national level in places like Nigeria and Pakistan and Brazil, where we have amazing education champions, all the way to the global level, where we're working with key governments and with the United Nations system to keep education center to what the world's crisis response will look like.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I find so amazing about Malala Fund's response in particular is actually the online publication called Assembly. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. It's a collection of amazing stories from young women around the world who are working on the front lines of advocating for girls' education, or even just their passions. And I think reading through some of the Assembly stories, and by the way, everyone, you will be seeing more of Assembly speakers throughout the day because many of the speakers have been featured on Assembly. But I think what's so amazing is that youth play a huge role in that advocacy work because in the end, they're the ones being impacted by much of these policies. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the youth role in advocating for girls' education.
It's so important, and I'm so glad you brought up Assembly. And because I wasn't at Malala Fund when it was created by the likes of my colleague Tess Thomas and the wonderful communications team that we've got, I can brag about it. And I can brag that it just won a Webby Award. And I can brag that it has featured some of the most powerful storytelling and narrative from young girls around the world. It was one of the first things when I was interviewing for this role. I looked at Assembly and really sat with some of the stories that are for girls, by girls, about girls. It felt to me like this treasure trove on the internet of what is available in terms of girls' power and potential, and really in their words in ways that's quite powerful. So I appreciate your bringing up Assembly, and I encourage everyone to check it out. I share it with my daughters at home. It's an inspiration. Sort of every single issue is an inspiration. And the role of young activism is incredible. I mean, I think that, in some ways, that's where Malala first kind of, got her start as a young activist. And now she's, of course, sitting for exams at Oxford. So for everybody out there, sort of continue to send, sort of strong and smart vibes her way. She's got a road of exams in front of her still, and we're really looking forward to seeing her on the other side of graduation and that incredible accomplishment. But I think that she paved the way for the voice, if strong and with purpose and with a real sense of true north. In fact, the voice, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't matter the age of the person. It doesn't matter whether that person has had sort of experience in advocacy training. It's really speaking from the heart and a sense of purpose in the world. And we've seen that time and time again over the past decade, how much the role of youth activism has sort of laid bare some of the, quite frankly, laziness of the adult population, and has laid bare some of the sort of misconceptions of how change happens. It is true that little change, one after the other, can transform an entire system or community, but you have to start somewhere. And I really admire when I watch the activism of young people in any context, at the grassroots level or all the way up to the United Nations. There seems to be such a sense of confidence and purpose that the little bit by the little bit is what will get us to the other side of it. And a sense of impatience and urgency that says we're going to get there tomorrow because this is the change the world needs to see. So that's sort of where, youth activism has played a role in my own life in terms of inspiration. And certainly I think it's sort of at the heart of who Malala Fund is in many ways, because of the start of our founder and the important activism that her father both supported and nurtured in her at a very young age. And that's you embodied, Jana. You are a leading youth activist. So I'd love to hear also your own reflections on what makes activism sort of alive and real for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think reading through different articles on Assembly and connecting with other youth activists has been really, really powerful and crucial to my own story and to my own activist journey, because I think for me, it's that I do want to see a change in the world, right? I do want to see more girls go to school. And I think because of that, I feel empowered to speak up for those girls, because I know that they would love to have an education. They just don't necessarily have the voice to advocate for that. And so I think it's like, how do you amplify the voices of those who aren't as privileged as yourself, whether it's for girls' education or for any other activist project? And so I think that's really, really the importance of youth activism in our world. And I think we see more and more of youth activism every single day. And I think now we can see that more than ever, especially as everyone is staying home. And so I encourage any young listeners listening in to please use your voice to amplify others, because I think that's so important.
And I do think that there's something really to be said for speaking sort of kind of the unpolished truth. There's a way to have talking points, and there's a way to be briefed, and there's a way to go in with a script that delivers a powerful message, and there is a time and place for that, and you should absolutely practice and rehearse and sort of do it. But then there are moments where you really do have to be led by your heart, and I think that's, for me, what youth activism has taught me, that the sort of fire that got me most excited about the issue of women and girls in the first place is what people can see in my body language. It's what they can hear in my voice. They can see the sparkle in my eyes. They say you're a charismatic advocate because you really do allow your body to feel the energy that you want in terms of the change. And I think that the youth activists with whom I've worked, they've reminded me of that. They've reminded me of the real value and power in letting your heart sort of speak for what you want to see in the world in terms of change.
So actually, can you share any advice you have for youth activists or young people listening in who are trying to pursue their education, maybe pursue advocacy itself, or really follow through with their passions?
Yeah, I mean, I have, sort of, I'll do three quick ones. I would do one is, don't worry too much about exactly how you think the path has to look for you, because it never will look that way, and then you'll just get disappointed. That means that you have to remain open to opportunities. That means sometimes you have to do the job that you didn't think you want to do in order to get to the job that you really do want to do. There's just not, in my experience, sort of this linear path when it comes to careers. And I think the degree to which you can keep your channel open, it's a famous choreographer, Martha Graham, used to say, just keep your channel open and allow yourself to be led with purpose and intention. And I think you'll be surprised and gratified at where it will lead you. Number two is network. And I don't mean it in the Washington, D.C. way of networking. I mean network. I mean, go to, sort of a virtual conference or panel and make it a goal to follow up with one or two people afterwards and just say, Jana, I saw you on that morning session yesterday on Facebook Live, and I really loved the way you answered that one question, or I found inspiration from you, right? So lead with generosity and sort of build connections so that you're cultivating relationships that are built on mutual respect and admiration. That's the kind of networking that will take you as far as you want to go in life. And then I think the third, and this is sort of strange in virtual times, but I would say that if you're at a meeting, always raise your hand. Always ask one question. If it's in a chat on a Zoom conference, put something out there that forces you to sort of really consider and kind of massage what your own thinking is about the topic, and then be brave enough to put it forward. It means that you're rehearsing all the time. It means that you're always forcing yourself to test your analytic skills and to flex new muscles. I think that you can't practice enough in that regard. And I know that the virtual sort of reality we're in makes it a little more difficult, but still push yourself. If you're going to any kind of online conference or panel, always make yourself have one intervention where you really are showing that you're paying attention and you're connecting the dots. I think those three things of sort of career path and networking and raising your hand are three ways to really mentor and nurture your own sense of activism.
And I even think while we're all staying home and are joining all these Zoom and webinars, I think you can actually practice some of the things that you would be doing in person. And so the more you raise your hand virtually, the more you're used to raising your hand in person, right? And so it's almost like the kiddie pool is the way I think of it, so that it's just a little bit easier to do so maybe when you're hidden behind a screen. But as much as possible, try to get yourself out there and think about it as you're like building stories and sharing your story with others. And I love how you were talking about how to keep your channels open and really try as much as possible to reach out to as many people as possible too. So
yeah, and I think you lead by example in that way in terms of building networks really built on love and respect and generosity. So I think you're already practicing that. And for those that are in the audience, think about how you can do that in your own life as well. It's the most powerful and heart-driven way of networking, and I think it really delivers incredible dividends.
Yeah, so we only have a couple of minutes left, but I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what are your hopes going for the future and onwards from this moment now, and how do you think other activists and other advocates can play a role in shaping that future?
Well, let's start from sort of the personal, right? I think in this moment, let's I'm sort of past the point of saying silver linings, but I am trying to recognize the aspects of this sort of new moment that are really powerful and good for self. For me, it means daily lunch with my girls. I haven't had daily lunch with my girls since they were in school and I've been working full time. So just sort of allowing ourselves to take sort of one aspect of this sort of reality that we find really nourishing and to kind of honor it and sort of think about how important it is for us. I think on the other side of the sort of like the work equation, let's think about Malala Fund, and let's think that we want education to really be understood as central to the recovery effort as it is. And we really want everyone to consider how much energy is required to get girls' education sort of back on track, sort of starting today and then sort of well after the recovery process has sort of started. So for us, that's a vision for where we're headed. And we also want to remember that the local leaders, those who are in environments where COVID-19 is going to have, I think, really harmful impacts that haven't yet been sort of fully realized. Let's remember always to hold those individuals, those champions, and those advocates sort of in our hearts and in our minds, and make sure that in our daily work, we're doing all we can to support and enhance their efforts and to lift up their voices as we go through the next several months of this crisis. So that's a little bit of what I hope we'll see as we go through the summer here in the US and sort of go into the fall, and school should be kicking back up again. Let's see where we are, and let's make sure that we're not forgetting so many that don't have the access that we do to incredible education.
Yeah, certainly. And then finally, to kind of end things, can you talk a little bit about your leadership style, how you think that can be applicable to so many of our listeners, and why you think leadership, especially now more than ever, is super, super important in whichever form it may take?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that I always say this, it sounds like sort of a strange way to talk about leadership, but there's enough to go around, And I think if you start always from a platform of generosity, it's always going to come back to serve you. So I consider myself a servant leader. And the way that I look most accomplished and most successful as a leader is when I have leaders all around me. When my organization is in a leadership position, when my executive leadership team is the best of the best and is sort of thinking critically about the next stage issues for girls' education. I think that sharing the leadership platform is really the most important thing you can do in lifting up other voices. It really then enhances the way in which and the light in which you're seen and understood as a leader. So I guess that's, if I had one piece of advice about leadership, it really is to always be in service, to the leadership of others, because the way that reflects back on you does so much. It supports so much kind of what you're trying to achieve in the world in terms of advancing a social justice agenda.
So then the very last question is, what is a few sessions you're looking forward to throughout the day? We are the kickoff, so it'd be great if you just preview a couple of the sessions coming up. And everyone, please do stay tuned throughout the day.
Well, I know that 11 o'clock, you have an incredible session with girl activists, and I think 3 activists from Girl Up. So I'm going to definitely be tuning in for that at 11 o'clock. Can't wait to see it. And then because I am such a fan of the Young Global Leaders program, which is part of the World Economic Forum and the sort of Davos program, I definitely have to point out that you've got a couple of other YGLs today. So my good friend Vikas Pota, who's actually putting on a teacher conference tomorrow for like 70,000 people around the world, a free online conference for teachers and by teachers. So I'm going to listen into what Vikas has to say and what your conversation with him reveals. And then, of course, you've got Drew, who's a visionary artist, amazing, creative force in the world. There's no other way to say it, a fellow YGL of mine. And so I also will be tuning into her program with you later today. So you've got an incredible lineup. And if I didn't have to also do my day job, I'm going to have you live on my other screen just to keep me inspired as the day goes on.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much for joining me. This was absolutely wonderful. And I think we've all really appreciated listening to your advice for youth activists like myself. So thank you again for everything.
Yes. Happy birthday, Jana. A great way to spend the day. And Malala Fund, really honored to be in the kickoff spot this morning. We wish you the best of the day ahead.
Thank you. Thanks again.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.